take the red pill.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
There's a need for a new world order, but it has different characteristics in different parts of the world.
Never before has a new world order had to be assembled from so many different perceptions, or on so global a scale. Nor has any previous order had to combine the attributes of the historic balance of power system with global democratic opinion and the exploding technology of the contemporary period.
After 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
I think his task will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. It's a great opportunity. It isn't just a crisis.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, a new world is emerging. It is a new world order with significantly different and radically new challenges.
You guys know what this represents? Well, maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storming?
Could be the calm before the storm.
Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. There's a lot of dialogue between our foundation experts and the government now, but what does opening up look like? You know, which activities have, like schools, have such benefit and can be done in a way that the risk of transmission is very low?
Yeah.
And which activities, like mass gatherings, may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all. Eventually, what we'll have to have is certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person. You know, it'll be a few $1 billion we'll waste on manufacturing for the constructs that don't get picked because something else is better. But a few billion in this, the situation we're in, where there's trillions of dollars, that's 1,000 times more, trillions of dollars being lost economically, it is worth it. And normal government procurement processes and understanding which are the right 7, in a few months those may kick in. But our foundation, we can get that bootstrapped and get it going and save months because every month counts. Things can reopen if we do the right things in the summer, but it won't be completely normal. You'll still be very worried. We may decide masks are important, although right now they're in short supply for health workers, so people should not go and hoard those. But the capacity of that can be brought up, so it may be something that, like China today, everybody who's walking around is wearing one of those. So we'll have a lot of unusual measures until we get the world vaccinated. 7 billion people, that's a tall order, but it is where we need to get to, despite a lot of things in between now and then to minimize the damage. But the ultimate solution, the only thing that really lets us go back completely to normal and feel good about sitting in a stadium with lots of other people, is to create a vaccine and not just take care of our country, but take that vaccine out to the global population.
More now of our special coverage here tonight, life in the U.S. in 10 years' time. By that time, there may be all kinds of new ways to safeguard and identify all those things that make each of us unique, our faces, even our fingerprints, even our eyes. Here now with more on the future of technology, NBC's Tom Costello.
The year is 2017. You're rushed to a hospital unconscious with no ID or medical history, but thanks to a microchip under your skin, it's all there. Science fiction 20 years ago, but a biometric reality today.
Interesting conversation happening right now on our Care 11 Facebook page about microchipping. I'm not talking about microchipping your cat or your dog. I'm talking about microchipping you.
We are beginning a program today, and it's a pilot program which will certainly grow into something larger and larger, and that is a community contact tracing program. We've done contact tracing all along. That a contact is a person who's been exposed to someone that we document to have the COVID infection. When we find someone who has a COVID infection, those people are immediately isolated. But we also work with them to figure out who their contacts were. Luckily, because you have been doing such a great job of cooperating and staying indoors, staying isolated, it used to be there were 10 contacts, at least, for every patient that we would find. Now, it looks like there are probably only 2 or 3 or 4 contacts, not surprisingly, because most people have been staying away from others. And that's good news. But the purpose of this program is to bring on people. We're going to start with 10 people. We may bring on up to 50 or even more as the program grows and as we see the needs for it. As we do more testing, we will find more and more people who have COVID-19. And again, we'll isolate every one of them, and we will find every one of their contacts, and we will make sure that they stay quarantined, and we'll check in with them every day. It's not just our county that's bringing more people on. There are going to be thousands of people hired who will be these contact investigators throughout the state. And this is occurring in many, many other states as well, perhaps all of the states in our country. We will be giving intensive training to these people, training not only for identifying and finding contacts, but also in terms of how to be sensitive about doing it. We also realize that as we find more contacts, some of the people we find are going to have trouble being isolated. For instance, if they live in a home where there's only one bathroom and there are 3 or 4 other people living there and those people don't have COVID infection, we're not going to be able to keep the person in that home. Every person who we're isolating, for instance, needs to have their own bathroom. And so we'll be moving people like this into other kinds of housing that we have available.
Well, again, I'm not as deep an expert on that as I am on vaccines.
Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them.
We want to thank you for turning folks in and making sure we are all safe.
For the world at large, normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population.
If you've observed recurring violations of the Safer at Home order, please continue to let us know at coronavirus.lacity.org/business-violation. You know the old expression about snitches? Well, in this case, snitches get rewards.
Countries are reacting in different ways as to how best to manage the overwhelming amounts of and misinformation circulating over the internet. In some cases, limited internet shutdowns are being implemented to quell panic.
Tat is the CEO of Clearview AI, a company that was already controversial for the one service that it offers to law enforcement.
The way it works is after a crime has been committed, after the fact, they look through the video evidence, and sometimes they have a face of somebody they don't know who it is. They can run it through our system, and our system searches only public information on the internet, and they may have a lead to a mugshot or a news article or a social media post of that person.
Now, as health authorities consider how to follow the paths of people who are positive for coronavirus, Tat says he's been in discussion with federal and state authorities about helping to identify people as part of a contact tracing program.
We talk about reopening. Now we're going to open it again.
We appreciate the leadership and sharing the president's desire to reopen the economy and get Americans back to work.
If we are to open up the economy in a way that's safe for everybody, that we need to be able to test quickly and also trace and find out who they've been in contact with.
Does that mean using public footage to find people who've been near someone known to be infected? Tat says the cameras are already in place that can trace someone's movements.
We think that a lot of retail spaces and gyms, they already have cameras that are there. There is the expectation that you're in a public area, so there's no necessarily expectation of privacy. The camera's already there in case crime happens, and they can now already be repurposed to help track anyone else who has had the virus.
And while masks might slow down the identification process, Clearview's system learns quickly. How many pixels do you need to identify somebody?
And we've had success with even older cameras. We can do things from about 110 pixels by 110.
The whole idea behind something like Google and Apple's contact tracing app, which they announced in April, is that being part of it is voluntary and that no one's identity will be revealed without their consent. But can we safeguard public health without identifying individuals? Or do we have to make a compromise on privacy? Glenn Cohen, a Harvard bioethicist, says we cannot wait to sort out the answer.
Well, there's been much discussion about the possibility of using apps that collect data of who we've been in contact with, and then you would notify the app if you get COVID positive, and people would be notified. We really just don't know whether that's going to be a successful intervention. And there are big risks about privacy, about the relationship we have to the state, about the access to the things we need to have good lives, like employment. And these are all things that I think need to be sorted out in real time, rather than say, oh, there's this shiny new toy over here, let's go ahead and use it, because what harm can it do?
What we're really trying to do here is think of solutions that take a little bit of privacy, that are after-the-fact investigations, that's using public data that's already out there, or security cameras footage that is already there, and help solve the problem.
Will an agency that uses your technology on top of other contact tracing technologies wind up with a repository that includes my identity and my health information and my whereabouts over the last few months in a way that we're all going to be uncomfortable with?
It's really up to those agencies and how they put these programs together. All we do is provide the identification part of the process. All we do is provide the identification part of the process.
Tracing agents in the hundreds and hundreds of people, right? You take the test and then you trace back all the contacts. It's never been done on this scale before. This is an army of tracers. They're basically investigators. We will do that the best we can with this 7-state consortium. But it could have been done from the federal government on a much tighter, more efficient basis.
You know, I agree with you on this. This contact tracing is very important, and it could enable our entire country for the first time to have a real public health system, a real public health core. And I've thought about it in a lot of different ways. Could we make this a part of AmeriCorps and encourage people to come and do this work and earn some credits to go to college, for example? Is there some other way we could do it? But I know that my friend, whom you know well, Paul Farmer, is heading up a program for Massachusetts now to try to get a state contact tracing core. Do you think maybe you could get the governors to ask the Congress to fund that as a part of all this money they're giving you? Or maybe it's legal now to spend some of the money, but we need a national core of healthy people who are properly trained to go out and do this contact tracing. We need the bodies.
Governor Baker invited us to be part of a consortium and to offer some of the insights and experience we've had in other countries in hiring and training a group, really a whole cadre of community health workers or contact tracers, rather. I can't help but say community health workers. And they would be virtually trained. They are being virtually trained and deployed right now. What we would do with this is that this virtual group of contact tracers would contact anybody who has tested positive to learn about their recent activities, who they may have been in contact with. We had something like 7,000 people, 9,000 people apply within the first couple of days to be contact tracers so that we can actually use people who are out of place, out of work rather, who can be trained, even lay people, to do this work. It felt like a good thing for the economy also.
But one of the things that you have to be able to do is to track people who are positive. Should we have a contact tracer corps, even if we call it something more elegant? Should we really build the first public health network we've ever really built in this country around this issue?
I think the answer is absolutely yes, and that's just going to require an army of folks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Today we are announcing the COVID contact and tracing system and initiative in the state of Washington. We are excited about this initiative because it is the next major step. And I'd like to tell you about this initiative. It is robust, it is vigorous, and it is comprehensive. And it needs to be all three of those to succeed. This initiative will be a statewide extension of what local public health districts have historically done for other diseases, such as tuberculosis and hepatitis and the like. But it will be on a much grander scale, as it needs to be, given the extent of the COVID-19 virus. It will be the largest in our state's history, as it should be. It has given us the opportunity to continue this for some more time as we then transition into the contact tracing, testing, and isolation initiative that we are implementing. So this initiative will represent a transition from one strategy to another. Our early days, we used social distancing. It's been frustrating, but it has been significantly effective. Now, as we attempt to transition to open back up our economy, we're simultaneously moving to this second initiative of testing, contact tracing, and isolation of people who in fact are infected. We think of this as a smart weapon. The second issue is that we will have testing and our contact tracing. Let's see. So we will then have people get their tests. Now, to show how this will work, we wanted to show you who will be the contact tracers. This is a labor-intensive endeavor, and we want to make sure that we have enough resources to get this job done. It's a very heavy lift for the people working on this effort, and that's why we're building up the contact tracing team, which by the end of this week will have 1,371 people who are fully trained when that is necessary to get this job done. And this will include, to date, 351 members of the Washington National Guard, 390 members of the Department of Licensing who have been trained, the State Department of Licensing, and a combination of 630 state and local health department professionals who today are working for the local health departments or the state health department.
Governor, where do we stand on the phases? Are we ready to start phase 2 June 1st, as Secretary Weissman has said?
Well, June 1st is a hopeful date, but it is very important to understand it is not fixed in stone. The virus will determine whether we can start on June 1, and our ability to be successful in our social distancing and our contact tracing will determine whether we can take that next step in June 1st. The more that everybody in the state of Washington does to socially distance, to make decisions in their personal life, not to get into congregations of 10 people at a party, even on a sunny day, the more likely it'll be. But we cannot guarantee that.
If restaurants are going to be required to keep a list of customers coming in as they move into phase 2, will there be a requirement for customers coming into a restaurant to prove their identity, such as providing photo ID? And to follow up on that, would there be penalties if somebody was to give false information?
Well, we're talking to the restaurant owners about the things that might make sense to them. And so we'll have more to say about this, to have some workable thing.
Hi, Governor. When it comes to contact tracing, how are you guys going to handle people or families who want to refuse a test or to self-isolate if they want to leave their home to get groceries? I know you said they can't do that. How will you make sure they don't?
As far as refusal, it just shouldn't come to that, and it really hasn't. We've had really good success when we've asked people to isolate.
We've seen so many reports of businesses violating your orders to stay shut down, and so little enforcement we are seeing. So why should any businesses comply?
For people who finally won't comply, they're going to have to comply eventually. And if they don't, there are sanctions they will face, either in civil court or in criminal court. I spoke to the Attorney General about this today. We'll have more to say about this in the days to come.
In front of me, you'll see a description of our 10-10-10 program. What that means is that effective May 15th, businesses, all businesses, will be able to reopen, including those non-essential businesses that have not been open previously, subject to a capacity rule of 10%, or, with our smaller establishments, 10 persons in the establishment itself. And then the final 10 is to the extent that you have someone, a customer who is seated for more than 10 minutes, businesses need to keep track of those people who come in.
Right now, we're still under the stay-at-home order, but once we start to come out of that, New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell wants every business to keep a record of every person who enters their establishment. This will help the Louisiana Department of Health track who a sick person may have come into contact with, a process called contact tracing.
Making sure you can follow people who have either been exposed to COVID or had COVID.
A spokesperson with the city of New Orleans sent us this statement. Details are still being worked out, but businesses will be expected to play a role and have a plan in place to help track employees and clients in their space. White already keeps track of customers at the Wrong Iron.
But what we had already been using at the Wrong Iron, because we ID everybody who comes in, is a scanner. So you show me your ID, I scan it. There's no phone number, but it gives me when you came in, you know, what the date was, and your information and address that you have on your driver's license.
As I approached the baby's room and stood outside, I was shocked to hear a deep, manly voice talking to my 7-month-old son. My blood ran cold.
Arjun Sood was standing outside his son Oliver's door Sunday when he heard that voice. He burst in, the voice stopped. He and his wife chalked it up to baby monitor interference. But once downstairs,
and I was standing right about here,
they heard the voice again.
Who is this?
An unseen intruder talking to them through their Nest security camera, using obscenities, including the N-word.
Asking me, you know, why I'm looking at him, because he saw obviously that I was looking back, and continuing to taunt me.
It was terrifying. Sood says once his shock subsided, he composed himself enough to record part of the ominous exchange.
What's that?
Sood believes the hacker also turned their upstairs thermostat to 90 degrees, noticing that the same night. A potential danger to their baby.
And then they mess with our thermostat. Why, who does that? Again, who does that?
The Soods unplugged their interior cameras, called police, and soon after, Nest itself.
And then they said, well, you should have used a unique password and 2-factor authentication, and if you did, you know, that would be that.
Sood's been using Nest for years, sinking thousands of dollars into the system to help secure his home.
5 outside, 6 outside, 7 outside.
He now questions Nest's security.
And that's why when I called Nest and I said, how long has this been going on for? How long has someone kind of been watching us? We don't know. We can't tell you. We don't have the logs.
Extremely disturbing, he says, considering there are cameras all over their home, with no indication someone outside might be watching, except on 2 cameras, where a blue light clicks on when someone talks.
Until they actually communicate with you, they could be in here watching, as we are doing right now, and there is no difference. You can't tell.
Everyone, the full public, or a partially approved vaccine with emergency use?
No, we're looking for a full vaccine for everyone that wants to get it. Not everybody's going to want to get it.
We will eventually have a vaccine, or even if we don't, we will eventually have herd immunity. In 2 years, this problem will be gone. But the consequences of the decision that we make now are permanent.
Remember, the truth is out there waiting to be found. Wake up, take the red pill, join the red pill InfoWar. Break the matrix, free your mind.
Take the red pill.